sit in, you can sit in this chair actually. You can go ahead and sit down over there. Yeah, like ASAP. Okay. So we're, yep. Okay. So basically, it's two pieces. I try to, because this is quick. We aren't. It's already pulling from this to Zoom. We aren't streaming live yet though. But once we hit this, it's gonna go live automatically. These are basically. What are you about to say?
Once the countdown is done, it'll go live automatically?
No, that's what I was gonna say. So you just hit play. So this is this. You just hit that double click. I actually let you do it, so it can be kind of familiar. So like once we go live, we're going to. Yes. So basically, you just double click on those to change the scene. So try it out. Just go to that one. So like once they're 5 minutes out, you just double click there. Yep, and then it's good there.
And this is where.
Yep. Yep, and then the green intro. We can use the green intro, the one right above it. Right there, just like that. That can be great for like just when we first come on. So like just for a couple seconds, and it's like, hey, this is Dom. We're doing this. Blank, blank, blank. This is Bethany. So forth, and then you just go to the default. Once we're kind of.
Oh, this is the intro. Oh, okay.
Yep.
So right after the countdown is done, I'll do this. And once that's done, y'all are done doing that, and then I'll change here.
Yep. And I'm just asking. Yes. And then. Yes. Let me get you framed up.
Do you want us to move the Bibles out of the way too?
Yeah, because I'm gonna have to. Have a mic. Okay. Yes, I'm about to set it up now. Then you can just take this and then you can put it on your backside and then just like probably run it on top. And then iPad Zoom. Maybe on this iPad. Let me get you framed up. This is camera one. I try to just let them introduce themselves, and most of them have their thing on the Zoom too. They're like, so their name changes, and I'm gonna go to Zoom. I'm about to do that. But yeah, it looks like Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty, Village Schools International, and Children's Relief International. Yes. And then we don't have to go live yet. But I want to source. I'll go back. And then if you could just tab over on the Zoom and then let me admit me, it should have like something in the waiting room. That's a lot of windows. Yeah, just only let me in right now though. Admissions, yeah. And then you can admit both of them to their host. I mean, their part of, yeah.
Good morning.
You can let anybody in now. That's fine. Just a moment. Try to focus on this one though. This is like straight ahead. This one's like your eye-to-eye contact, but you'll be. So yeah, it'll be now. You don't have to look at this one. That'll be like when you're looking at Zoom now. And then now you can. So this will be when you can actually pin the. So pin that one. And click it again. Let's see if you can spotlight. Yep. Okay.
So everybody's doing.
Yeah, so everybody kind of primarily sees that. So then once we start, if you just take it off of spotlight, then it should start doing it by audio, and then you can mix it up between gallery view. And since I didn't know, I forgot Bethany was gonna be here, so this is actually helpful. So I can, I don't have to be, yeah. I can mute myself actually. I should mute my mic too.
Hello, test, test, test. Okay.
I'm able to start streaming.
Oh, it's because I'm. I think it's because. Okay, never mind. I'm streaming from Zoom. Crisis averted. Okay, that's why.
It's already doing.
Yes, and then we're here, and then go back here.
And I'll switch it to the green.
Exchange of Tuesday. We are here to hear from 3 organizations. My name is Bethany. I'm here with the Spiritual Life Office here on campus at Baylor. And if each organization can hear me, if you guys could introduce yourselves and the organizations you represent, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jeremy Everett, and I am the Executive Director of the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty. And so we are a research and innovation project here at Baylor that our job is essentially.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear us? Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, I'll continue, but our job is to create solutions to address hunger and poverty, both domestically and globally.
My name is Brianna Duffield, and I'm with Children's Relief International. We are a nonprofit missions organization based out of Rockwall. And our mission is to take the light of Christ to the poor of our time. And so we work in 7 different countries around the world, working amongst those living in deep poverty.
My name is Josh Vinton. I'm with a ministry called Village Schools International. We work in East Africa in remote areas to provide access to high school education for kids who would otherwise not have the chance to go.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, if you guys could explain what you guys value as an organization, go ahead.
Yeah, at CRI, we seek to do holistic ministry. So like I said, we work in 7 different countries around the world, and we work with international partners living in those areas at our different projects and locations. So we work directly with the international partners to meet the felt needs of the community, and also providing ministry, pastoral care, and sharing the gospel in those communities as well.
I would say one of the key things that we value with VSI is community participation and figuring out what is the best way for empowering people and giving them the space to where they can make the changes necessary in their lives. So when we partner with communities to build schools, they spend a lot of time doing labor to make bricks and carry stones and provide sand and water for the construction. And the end result is that they end up viewing the school as theirs because they spent a lot of time and effort, and they put sweat equity into making this change and providing a better future for their kids and their grandkids. So we really value that, and it's cool to see the way that people's stories change as a result of their participating and their taking ownership in that particular change.
Yeah, that's great. And the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty, essentially we value a few things. One, we value addressing hunger and poverty as systemic issues. So we work on a local, state, and federal level, even a global level on with certain projects in order to make sure that we have a systemic response, because many of these issues are structural in nature. And so we want to make sure that everybody has a voice, whether they be, somebody that's working or visiting a local nonprofit or a food pantry, all the way to the advocate who's working in Washington. So we really try to build a collaborative response to that, meaning that we don't believe that any one organization or any one sector has the capacity to address hunger or poverty by themselves. So we think inherently it requires all of us if we want to ultimately end these issues. And to that end, we're looking for scalable solutions. So we've got about 60 researchers and about 40 or 50 practitioners who live in regions throughout Texas and that are implementing different types of projects that we do. But we're always looking for something that we can scale either around the nation or around the globe. But we know that the only way that we're actually going to end these problems is if we work together. And we know that they weren't created overnight. And so it's going to take something, it's likely going to take us committing our lives to the cause.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, all of you. It is very evident that you guys are very passionate about what you guys do. If you could explain something that brought you to your organization, what would that be?
I'm happy to go. When I was a college student, I was studying at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama, and I felt the undeniable call to the issue of poverty. And so for me, it immediately thrust me into low-income communities in and around the U.S. So I lived in low-income communities for about 20 years so that I could see the problem from inside out. And it was while I was working in San Antonio's West Side that Baylor and an organization called the Christian Life Commission called to see if this would be a project that I would be interested in taking on and providing some guidance to. That was almost 12 years ago now. I didn't have quite so much white and gray in my beard, but I knew for me at that point when I was a college student that this would probably be the issue I would work on for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I actually was a college student not too long ago. I graduated from Dallas Baptist University back in 2019, and I studied intercultural studies at DBU, which I knew that the Lord was calling me to ministry and specifically to serve the hard to reach areas of the world. And I really didn't know much about poverty at the time. And I found Children's Relief International and just learning about deep poverty around the world. When I say deep poverty, it means most of the people that we serve live on less than $1.90 a day. And so learning about that and seeing those realities with my own eyes just broke my heart for those who are just in situations that are really hard to solve overnight, like we said, or like was mentioned before. We cannot just give a food distribution or set up a medical tent and solve these issues overnight. These are deep-rooted centuries of struggles, decades of struggles, and these are real people that are made in God's image and are loved by Him, and so we're called to serve them. And that's where my heart ended up landing at CRI, and so that's yeah, a little bit of my journey and how I got here. So.
For me, Village Schools has been a part of my life since I was a little kid. I grew up as a missionary kid in Tanzania, and Village Schools was founded by a couple of high school graduates, and they had this vision for every kid in every village in Tanzania getting the chance to go to high school. My parents decided to join them, and I was unwittingly towed along. So I got to grow up watching it all happen, and the journey from starting in 2005 with one school and 180 kids into now it's over 50 high schools in 3 different countries. And getting to watch that has deeply impacted you and my faith and just a lot of the things that I value. I got to spend of years teaching at one of the schools. I taught trigonometry and algebra because I'm a nerd and I like math. And those few years teaching really impacted me, and I think the Lord used. I would say I learned a lot more than I taught, and so those couple of years teaching, I ended up deciding I wanted to study math in college because I wanted to be a math teacher. And I didn't know what that was going to look like, but this door opened up with Village Schools. And so I've been doing that ever since. And I really enjoy it because it's just a big part of who I am. And yeah.
It all sounds like you have grown as individuals, especially working in your organization, excuse me. Is there one thing that you could say students should know before they work with your organization? Or if they're more interested in learning more information, who should they contact?
Yeah, I think it's important to really be open to understanding. I think oftentimes in the U.S., we have a tendency to blame the poor for their plight. And anytime you diagnose a problem incorrectly, your solutions are always going to be wrong. And so I think it's really being open and listening first, and listening to the people who are in poverty, both to hear to hear their stories, but also to hear what they would like to see happen, both with their lives and ways in which we can systemically reduce hunger and poverty in our world. So I think that's paramount. I think the second thing would be recognizing that the primary cause of hunger and poverty in the U.S. is underemployment, meaning that people are employed, they're working, they're just not making enough money to be able to make ends meet. And so often, if you're in an hourly job, as many of you who are students are in hourly jobs, you're not paid a very high wage, right? So you're paid close to minimum wage, and your hours each week vary very widely, right? And so one week you might have 30 hours, the next week you might have 15 hours. And so it sets up an unpredictable source of income for you. And certainly imagine that for our families who are out there, for a parent who is trying to take care of several kids, and they don't know how much money they're going to make each year. If they were able to get full-time hours every week of the year, then at minimum wage, that's still only $13,000 a year. So that's barely enough to even afford rent, even in a low SES town like Waco. So I think really understanding the problem before we have a tendency to rush to solutions. And when I say understand, I mean like deeply understanding it for years. Spend time really listening for years before you jump to solutions. If they want to learn more about us, they can go to hungerandpoverty.org. That's our website.
Thank you.
I really want to echo what Jeremy said. I was listening to a TED Talk a couple months ago by this Italian guy, Ernesto Ceroli, and he worked in Africa for a while. And he started out his TED Talk by saying, above all else in economic development, respect. And you have to respect the people that you're going to work with. It's so easy to, with all our money and our education and our degrees and everything, to just come in and sort of feel like we know all of the answers and we know how we're going to fix this. And if you just do X, Y, Z, your poverty will go away, your hunger will go away, your lack of access to clean water will go away. And so if you're interested in whether it's mission work or community development, international development, respect and being exactly what Jeremy said, being willing to listen to people. And I think theologically, if you look at the incarnation and how Jesus incarnated into our reality, if we were to model, if Jesus' incarnation were to be modeled off of what we do so often, Jesus would have come in as a 35-year-old male with armies, and he would have conquered everything and done it all in a matter of weeks, because he had the power and the ability to do that. But rather, he spent decades silent. He didn't do anything, and he just sat and listened. And I think there's something that we can learn from that. And Jesus taking all of that time in the most important ministry in the history of the universe, taking all of that time, and then asking ourselves, what does that look like as we go about and serve whatever mission field that looks like. Yeah. And if you want to talk more, you can just email me or go to Village Schools.
Absolutely. I think Dominic McShann coming in here, and I'd be very interested just to hear about some of the blame or stigma that may be kind of associated with hunger in itself sometime, and what are some things that students can be mindful of, or even be able to take a step forward to address the stigma that's going to be sometimes associated with that. Kind of how some of you all were saying, it's very easy for us to blame the poor for being poor.
Something we talk about at Children's Relief International a lot is our responsibility, being blessed with both having access to the gospel, but also being wealthy as well. And so just really recognizing that poverty is very complex. There are very different levels of poverty. We talk about the fragile, the flawed, and the oppressed at our organization. The fragile being those who experience natural disasters, who experience droughts, who experience seasons where they don't have food because the crops aren't growing. We talk about the flawed, and those are often the ones that we tend to blame and kind of bring to the forefront of our mind when we think of poverty, those who may be living in addiction or whatever that may be. And then we talk about the oppressed, and those are people that are either oppressed by their caste systems, governments, maybe sex trafficking, things like that nature. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people, something I've heard once was a lot of people, when we think of poverty, we think of, oh, well, if you just worked harder, if you just pulled yourself up by your own bootstraps, your life would be better. But sometimes when you're not given boots or straps, it's really complicated to even do that for yourself. And so, yeah, and so just really recognizing that poverty is very complex and is always, it looks different in every part of the world. And there's no easy solution to solving poverty.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo what Renata said, that poverty is so complex. There's a saying, because I live in Africa, if wealth was a direct product of hard work, every African woman would be a multimillionaire. There are very few people on this planet who work as hard as African women do. And so these problems are very much systemic. They're very much complex. And it requires time to understand the nuances of it. I think so often our culture, we just want quick, easy answers, 140 characters, and to come to sort of a very surface level understanding of these things. And that's just not how things work. You do yourself a disservice, you do the people you're trying to help a disservice by trying to make these things really simple. And that's not at all how they are. There is of course an element of personal responsibility, and there is this systemic side of things, and it's tension between these two things. But you have to understand that it's very complex, very nuanced. Yeah. So take time, read good books, listen to people, and talks.
Yeah, to add to that, I would just say that to the complexity of poverty, that if people are predominantly underemployed, if that's the primary cause of poverty, at least in the US, typically what they have to do each month is they have to make trade-offs. And so they have to decide what are they going to pay for, because they don't make enough money to be able to pay for rent and childcare and medical bills, or food, or transportation. And so every month towards the end of a pay period, they're forced to make trade-offs to decide what are they going to choose to pay for this month. Oftentimes what we find for families in poverty in the US is they choose to make food the trade-off. So they choose to try to figure out how they can stretch their food budget. Either the parents will choose not to eat, or they'll reduce the amount of food that they consume, or they'll purchase foods like ramen noodles, things that are very high in sodium, but low in cost, and to be able to try to stretch their food budget. Because if they don't buy food, that's one thing. But if they don't pay rent, they're going to get kicked out of their home. If they don't pay their car payment, their car gets repossessed, and so they typically make food the trade-off every month. Is what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think we think of a hierarchy of needs where you get your food, water, and shelter met, and then you can build on top of that. But a part of the problem is when people don't even have these needs, basic needs being met, then everything that needs to be on top of that falls down. And it seems like all of y'all's organizations really address this problem. So if students wanted to learn more or maybe even work for these organizations, what kind of training or orientations do your organization make employees go through?
I'll jump on that question. If you're interested in serving with village schools, we have people who come and serve as missionaries, missionary teachers in our high schools for summer. If you're a college student, you can come, after you've graduated. If you want to come for a year or 4 months, we can arrange that as well. One of the things I have personally, I grew up in Tanzania, and I lived in a little village, and I mean, when you think African village, like a lot of the stereotypes that you come to mind are fairly indicative of sort of my upbringing and the environment that I grew up in. You learn a lot by living off of like $2 or $3 a day. It changes your perspective on a lot of things, and just life in general here in the U.S. I would really encourage you, if you're interested in working in some sort of poverty alleviation, spend some time being poor. You can have your money saved up, you can have your income or whatever, but like live like a poor person, and try to understand exactly what Jeremy was saying, the trade-offs that you have to make, and the psychology behind that, because just understanding the boots that where people are walking through. I think there's an incredible amount of value in that, and you being able to relate on some level to what they're going through. And that's what I would say. If you're interested in going and teaching in a little village in Africa, we can definitely provide a village for you to live in, and you'll learn to live off of a couple dollars a day.
Thank you. That makes me excited to hear and just think about. We will have the poverty simulation today. So for students that are interested in joining in, they definitely have the opportunity to just really kind of put themselves in a place in which you're able to have to make some of those challenging decisions. So we'll be doing that after this session, actually. And I think that'll just be a unique opportunity. So as we mentioned, just thinking about considering yourself, poor, and what that look like for you, and what is it like to make some of those decisions. I'm also very interested to hear, just to share with the audience, what or how will we describe poverty in an American sense as well as abroad? Because I think we have two unique organizations that are doing this work globally and also focusing domestically. So if there's any kind of context or information about what's some of the differences, what are some of the similarities as far as hunger and poverty here and abroad?
Just on I can speak to the global sense. I can just give you even some numbers that I had just learned a couple weeks ago. We actually also, if you're interested, we do a kind of more on a global scale poverty simulation as well. And you can reach out to me at Brianna at childrensrelief.org if you're interested in that as well. And so, and so even in one of the profiles that we walk through, one of someone living in our project, he makes about 25 cents a day. And we had just heard from our international partners just some of the effects of COVID-19, even in their community, in their village. So he sells baskets for a living, and the markets are closed currently at the moment. People are not going out to buy anything at the moment. So his income has dropped. And so I think if people like this man, and I think of how their prices, we were told that a bag of food that would feed about a family of 4 for about 2 weeks, it normally costs about $8 US to feed a family for about 2 weeks. And since COVID-19 and since all of the restrictions and limited resources, that has doubled in price to $16. And like I said, the markets are closed and people are not being able to purchase things and sell their goods. And so now you have an issue of people who already are struggling to afford that $8 food to feed their family for 2 weeks, who are now seeing drops in their income, and then the doubling in prices of food. And so that's just a little glimpse of what's going on in the world right now. And we see that a lot. And so, like I said, poverty is very complex. It looks very different. And that's just in Africa. I mean, it looks very different for the people that we know that are living in the deep forest in South Asia. And so, yeah, it's just very different, very complex. And yeah, it's dealing with a lot less money than you and I would ever even imagine to live by on a daily basis. So,
Josh, why don't you continue on the global front?
Sure. Echoing what Brianna said, it's interesting. She was talking about sort of the inability of people to pay for food, and I don't know what countries you guys are working in, Brianna. In Tanzania, where most of our work is primarily an agricultural society, and a lot of our beneficiaries are farmers, and a lot of Tanzania exports a lot of raw agricultural products, and because of borders being closed and trade problems, there is a demand. There's a contraction in demand, and so rice that they would usually sell for like 75 cents a kilo, now 30 cents a kilo, because they can't get anybody to buy rice. And so it's very interesting how COVID specifically has caused all sorts of economic problems and disrupted things on, just all up and down the class scale. One for poor people, and whether you're living in an urban area or a rural area, everybody's. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, I want to echo, I think what Josh and Brianna are saying is excellent, and I'm incredibly grateful for their commitment to the cause. And obviously they're brilliant young adults who could do anything that they want. And the fact that they are using their skills and their gifts on behalf of people whom Jesus in Matthew 25 calls the least of these, but he also equates them as members of his family, right? So they are members of his family. The rest of us are judged based upon what we do or do not do to further the cause of those who are hungry or in prison or sick and so forth. So I love what they're saying, and there are significant differences in what's happening in global poverty versus domestic poverty. In where we see a lot of extreme poverty and extreme hunger, which is obviously, to Josh's point, skyrocketing during the COVID-19 outbreak. It's really beginning to kind of slowly hit the global south, and so the World Food Program, which is kind of the UN's agency to address global hunger, is estimating that incredibly high rates of extreme hunger that are going to lead to famine and rapid decline and death and so forth. So major issues, a lot of it has to do with nation building and infrastructure. A lot of countries just, they don't have the same level of infrastructure that we have here. And we cut extreme poverty in the US twice, and they were through federal interventions. And so I know a lot of us grew up in contexts where like, it should be the church's job to end hunger. It should be the church's job to end poverty. But the reality is it takes us all. And the biggest leaps that we've made as a nation in addressing poverty were during the New Deal, back during the time of FDR, coming out of the Great Depression, and then during the Johnson administration when he declared war on poverty. So those two periods led to seminal declines in extreme poverty in the U.S. So though we still have high rates of poverty, right now, before the pandemic, we had 40 million Americans that were both food insecure or at risk of hunger and also living below the poverty line. Now those estimates range anywhere from 70 to 80 million people that are in those current conditions. But we also know that the poverty level is an inadequate measure of what it actually takes to live in the US. And so really you have to be about the 200% level of poverty if you're actually going to probably be able to make ends meet. So, and that's over 100 million Americans before the pandemic. We're living at that level. So we know that poverty in the U.S. is significant. What's unfortunate in the U.S. is that we've got some great infrastructure, a public education system. To Josh, Josh is trying to build an education system in Tanzania, and we have a public education system that we've woefully unfunded in the U.S. And each school district is very different. One of my kids, two of my older boys, grew up in Waco public schools, and in Waco public schools, 91% of the children in Waco public schools are on the free and reduced lunch program. 91%. 9% of the children in Waco public schools are Anglo or white. And so oftentimes when you wonder if structural racism is real or not, it evidently is real. If you have 9% of your population that is not on the free and reduced lunch program, and 91%, mostly minority households, are in Waco. On the other hand, one of my other sons is at Midway and in the Midway school system. Now we have two boys in the Midway school system, and they were issued a class set of iPads even before the pandemic. So just the amount of technology and resources at one school district versus what were at the other school district are vastly different. So all that to say, so poverty looks different in the U.S. than it does globally. And there are some things that we can do to build upon the infrastructure that we do have in the U.S. to significantly reduce hunger and poverty in our time.
Thank you all. I feel like I also heard a theme of connections there, and that's one of the themes that we wanted to highlight for Missions Week this week is the connections of so many different things. So as we wrap up this session, how would you all just kind of describe some of the connections with hunger and poverty? I feel like we've already began to start talking about some of those, whether that is socioeconomic status, whether it's race, gender, nationality. But just for those that may not be as familiar, can you all just share what are some of the connections that you see impacting hunger and poverty directly?
I think, yeah.
And the why of the impact.
Yeah, I think like even Jeremy said, touching on like education, I think when you can't provide for your family dinner, or you can mainly provide them one meal a day, and you're also having to work and find a job. You're also having to take maybe one of your kids to a medical care center that's a 3-hour walk away, and that's going to take most of your time. So maybe you don't get to work today. And then you're also trying to enroll your kids into school, and it's $25 a year for tuition and uniform and school supplies, yet you only can maybe put one of your 5 children through school. Which one gets to go? And I think it's just this never-ending cycle of if we can't eat, we don't feel good, so we have to go get medical care. So then we have to miss school, and then we're not getting an education. And so you just constantly see this cycle, especially in global poverty. I think it's just very interconnected across all aspects of education, health, and even economical structure and government structures as well. So everything is connected.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Obviously we're seeing a whole lot right now around issues of structural racism in the U.S. And, I think people that are in minority households are 3 times as likely to experience hunger as those in white households in the U.S. And the reality is that you can't, if you think about somebody that has harmed you as an individual, somebody that is maybe they humiliated you in front of your group of friends, maybe they physically attacked you, maybe they verbally attacked you, but if you think about that, chances are good that you're not just going to immediately reconcile with them without any kind of repentance on their part, right? You're not just going to immediately reconcile because you're hurt. And so for 400 years, particularly as it relates to the African American community in the U.S., we have done, both on a policy level and church communities, have done things repeatedly to structurally hurt the African American community in the U.S., which has put people in Anglo households ahead, both economically and among a whole host of issues. So ultimately, if we want to end hunger or we want to end poverty, we have to end structural racism. We have to see an end of organizational racism. And so to do that, I feel like we have to relent. We have to recognize, hey, we've done a wrong here, and we have to admit it. And then, as people of faith, we know we have to repent from that. But then we need to restore what we've taken. And ultimately, I think if we do those things, then we can achieve reconciliation. But we won't end hunger until we end structural racism.
I want to add on to what Jeremy said. I think that was really good. Sharing that. I've been reading quite a bit on sort of the long-term impact that colonialism and the slave trade have had on Africa specifically, and the structural inequalities that have been baked in from many, many years. And sort of the most perfect examples of that are, you see, like the Rwandan genocide with Hutus and Tutsis slaughtering each other because the way that the Belgians pitted them against one another. And then you also have, when lots of African countries newly took independence. Lots of Western countries like to think they benevolently gave independence to these African countries. No, they were about to get slaughtered and kicked out because Africans had had enough of them. But so many African countries got all of these loans that, and then 5-10 years you have countries taking on more and more debt, and sort of created this new neo-colonialism, and you have strings attached to grants and aid packages that provide favorable trade conditions for large oil companies and mining companies. And it would, if you have a chance to do some reading, it would really shock you the things that are happening right now in Africa that, whether it's in Nigeria or South Africa or just different places where, quite frankly, the global economy has exported slavery to Africa. And it's sort of an out of sight, out of mind. There's a lot of structural problems that need to change. But I do, in my own meager few years that I've been doing what I've been doing, I have lots of reason to hope. And I see people who, in spite of everything, the whole story of village schools, there's 2 high school graduates who founded the organization, and they felt the calling from God that every kid in every village in Tanzania should have the chance to go to school. They started 50 schools. And, most people would just write them off because they came from a poor village. So I have much reason to hope, even in the face of huge, seemingly intractable structural problems. There's really good people out there who are working to do really amazing things, and I believe that they're the hands and feet of God, and through them we might see we'll see the kingdom of heaven come and manifest itself now.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for giving up your time and joining us today. We're excited for the things to come this week. We're excited for the poverty simulation and really to spread awareness and their connections to things such as each of your organizations and figuring out ways to, one, get involved and also just educate yourself. So it's one thing to get involved, but you can take that first step just by learning more, educating yourself, and exploring resources. So thank you to Children's Relief International. Thank you to Village Schools. Thank you for the Baylor Collaborative on Hunger and Poverty and all of the great work that each of you all are doing. And we are forever grateful and thankful for you all for joining us today. Thankful for Kaylee too. Kaylee's been preparing some questions and hopped into this like whatever, we're going live. So very grateful and excited.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, and that'll be it for us.